if you were super committed to getting that band or your own music out there, this may sound crazy, you'd find a way to figure out 500 grand. I'm just telling you, as weird as that sounds, the only reason why I've learned how to make millions of dollars, and I have, is because I want to get my books out there.
All right, Hitmakers. What's up, my Hitmaker Nation? How's that for an opening statement? I picked that clip. I don't know if I've had another guest on the show yet who can make that claim. So my guest today is Dr. Benjamin Hardy. Something a little different for you guys. He is, he'll explain it. He's a writer. He's got a new book coming out the same day as this podcast. It's called Personality Isn't Permanent. And I went up on his mailing list probably a couple of years ago. I was just getting into reading self-help, personal development type articles on Medium. And I think he was actually the top ranked writer on Medium.com. I landed in the marketing funnel and got on his mailing list. And earlier this year, he put out a call for, if you have a podcast, he'd like to appear on it to promote his book, and he is doing 200 of them. So I wasn't sure if this would be a great fit for what he does. But the more I thought about it, the more I thought, if you are interested in music, if you're interested in learning an instrument, if you're interested in a career as a musician, that means you need to grow to a level that's beyond your current self. And that's a lot of what he writes about. So I replied that I did have a podcast, and I told him what it was about. And to my surprise, his people accepted. So this was a good conversation. After we did it, I felt weird about it. I felt unprepared. I didn't think it went well. But I listened back to it today, and it did, in fact, go well. And really, what it was this is the first interview that I have done since July of last year. And the first one I've done over Zoom ever. So there's some audio things that I now wish I could change, but I can't. How do you know until you try, right? You don't. So this was recorded a while ago on April 21st, as you'll hear. It's now Sunday, June 14th. I went to the Black Lives Matter rally in St. John here today. It was nice to see a lot of people turned out. And so, I think this is a time for personal growth, reframing the way that we all look at our lives, being open to looking at things differently, changing the way we go about maybe things we've taken for granted. It certainly has made me take a hard look at what I've been doing with this show, who I'm talking to, what I'm talking about. Then, of course, for those of you who've been following along, you may notice that this is not a podcasted out version of the late night show, which 2 weeks ago I just couldn't do it. This past week I didn't have it lined up. I find the social media machine, if you're not ahead of the game, it can become pretty overwhelming pretty quickly, and then at that point it's like, well, what am I even doing this for? The other side of it is that podcasts essentially have a data plan, and at my current bandwidth, one of those shows at 2.5 hours long eats up half of my thing for the month. So I got to look at my budget. So we're going to be mixing it up over the next little bit. The show's not going away. I still can't go out and play live, although I am doing a thing at the Imperial Theater on Tuesday when this show comes out here in town. The Imperial Theater is doing they call it the Incubator Project. So it's like an 800 cap theater built in 1913 as a vaudeville theater, and they can't have live shows either. What they're doing is they're inviting local artists to come and workshop new material on their stage. So for me, I get to go and play my own material with their crew on their stage, and I get to workshop, how well does my gear work on a big stage, which is can be a bit of a learning curve, like shock to the system if you're not used to it. So it's a pretty exciting opportunity, and just to play there, right? Like I can't sell 800 tickets. So how do you get ready to play on a stage like that without actually doing it? All right, hope you enjoy this one. LearnDrums.ca is the home for all things related to this show. LearnDrums.ca/hitmakers will bring you to the archive, and the latest episode is always featured on the homepage. Learn Drums on Instagram, LearnDrums.ca on Facebook, YouTube, LearnDrums.ca. If you like it, tell a friend. Like, share, subscribe. You know what to do. All right, here we go. Enjoy. Hello.
How are you, Ryan?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, dude.
Good. This is a little surreal.
Why? What's going on?
Oh, nothing. I guess I've watched your videos, but to have one that's like responding to me is like
hello. What's up? Dude, I love your outfit, man. I love your glasses. Where do you live?
I live in St. John, New Brunswick, Canada.
Dude, that's awesome. If you don't mind me asking, what inspired your persona or like your your clothing?
Today I just wanted to I don't know, feel like bright, kind of peppy, exciting. I don't know, it's spring.
It's awesome.
I would say these two items in particular, this shirt, I just wanted a kind of a floral shirt. So I used to play in a band, and we kind of didn't have any success for a long time. And we started to, in the last couple of years, get some attention. We had an opportunity to tour internationally a little bit, and we started to get told by people who work in the industry that we weren't convincing as rock stars and needed to dress cooler. So I started shopping for flashier clothes at that point.
It's funny because I've been studying the Beatles a lot lately.
Yeah.
I don't know if you heard about the new documentary that's coming out this year with the Beatles.
No.
You know who Peter Jackson is, the guy who did the Lord of the Rings movies?
Yeah.
He's doing a freaking intense deep dive Beatles documentary that comes out in September.
Wild.
It's going to be good, dude.
It's going to be like 3 hours?
It could be long, dude, knowing Peter Jackson.
Right.
It could be really
amazing.
Long. But it's being done by Disney. Like he's doing it through Disney, so he's got the whole arsenal. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. It's going to be on Disney Plus?
Dude, I think it's going to the theaters. I think it will be on Disney Plus, but I think it's going to go to the theaters. Like he's got like 55 hours of like non-scene footage from like when they were recording Let It Be, their last album.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It should be interesting.
Cool. Have you seen that documentary?
The Let It Be?
Yeah.
I haven't, but they said that Peter Jackson's is going to highlight a lot of like the happiness that was going on. Cause I guess the documentary Let It Be was kind of focusing on kind of their breakup and the negative aspects.
Yeah, that's what I've heard too. I actually haven't seen it myself, but
yeah,
my understanding is that it's
I guess
tense.
Peter Jackson's going to focus on some of the positive interactions, and they were still having fun together, and they still loved each other, even though obviously it was a breakup and there was some frustrations.
Sure. I mean, it's a great album. There's
yeah, totally.
Yeah,
they produced a lot in 7 years.
Yeah, no kidding. It's it's pretty wild.
Cool, man. Well,
what can I say about the Beatles that hasn't been said?
Yeah, me neither. Me neither. Yeah, I've just been studying them. There's a really good book called The Powers of Two. It's all about their creative process. It's pretty cool. It's pretty
that's neat. They were a band that for myself, I didn't get it. And it was a product of growing up in the 90s. And like there were a few certain songs I liked, but I think the production sounded dated. And until I read the Coffee Table book one summer, the Beatles anthology. And the story is amazing.
Yeah, I didn't get it until kind of hearing and reading several books on the subject. And I'm like, okay, this is pretty ridiculous, actually.
Yeah, no kidding. And just like told by themselves too. Just the trajectory, whether like even if you never heard a note of the music, it's like an amazing story. Yeah, cool. All right. I'm
stoked to be with you, man. Sorry to throw that out there. You did remind me of a musician. Just
I love it. Yeah, no, I wanted to put myself in the mode or the zone, I guess.
I love it, dude.
Yeah, I got to
Happy to
admit,
be with you.
I appreciate you being here. This is actually my first distance version of this. Usually it's in person, but
Ooh, yeah, I wish I could be with you.
no, it's all right. It's actually something that I've been thinking about as we've been kind of locked down the last month. I've been, this is something I've been thinking about figuring out for a while, how to do the distance thing, and just have never had to. Now's the time.
Yeah, they call that a forcing function.
Indeed. All right. So I've got a bit of an agenda here. Not a sinister agenda, just a
let's just follow that agenda.
Itinerary. How about, so I thought for and I usually chop these up too, so whatever. For my listeners who may not be familiar with yourself and your work, I thought we kind of talk about who you are, what you do, how you got into what it is you do. I did look over the sorry, I'm excited.
Personality?
Yes, the book, and I know you bring it up in the first little bit, so I'm wondering if you could share some of that story here. So first of all, I guess my first question is, because I was kind of trying to explain to my wife, how would you describe what you do? What is your job?
At the end of the day, I write
Uh-huh.
books, blogs, and create videos. And I put those videos in different formats, usually, behind private paywall, like online course programs. So, I mean, I basically talk about and write about psychology, business, life challenges, existentialism. I mean, I write about a lot of different things, but I basically put words on paper or speak them from my mouth into a TV or into a computer. I mean, that's the logistics of it, really.
That's excellent. Do you, but in that, in saying that, so if somebody asked you, I guess that is.
If I were to break it down in one word, I'd probably just say I'm a writer.
Right. But you are somebody who writes about kind of personal development topics as opposed to like mystery novels or something.
Yeah.
So how'd you come to this field of study and field of content creation? Yeah.
So basically, I think the things that really led me this way was, the traumatic experiences I had as a young man. Like my parents got divorced. Father was an extreme drug addict all through my teenage years. And basically life was just in flux, total chaos, zero stability. And really didn't get better until ultimately I was around age 20. I decided to leave for about 2 years to go on a church mission. I just felt like I needed a new environment, new situation, new purpose. And it was the experiences that I had during that church mission that really blew my mind. Like, I started journaling a lot, had good leadership, was doing like community service.
Where did you go?
Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Okay. And what were you
doing? So I was chilling in the hoods and the country of Pennsylvania and just doing all sorts of missionary work, like, whether it be proselyting or whether it be mostly service of sorts, and just a lot of time to journal, filled stacks of journals, just had good leaders who kind of helped me to see my life differently, looked at my past, my future differently. And I just went through such a change during those few years that when I came back, I was really interested in psychology. I was a lot more aware of myself and the world. And I came home, realized that a lot of my high school friends couldn't really see the changes that had happened in me. I mean, they could see them, but they didn't really understand them. And I just realized if I'd stuck around them a lot, I'd go back to kind of the way I was before. And I didn't want that. So I ended up studying psychology in school, getting married, and then getting a PhD, and just really wanting to understand change.
And what was it led you to make that break in the first place? Was it like, got to get out of here, or was there some specific, like, this is the thing?
I felt like that was the best option I could think of. My younger brother ended up joining the Marines. So he got out of there. For me, we'd grown up in a religious family. And so like we had religious roots, although that was kind of shattered and destroyed when my parents got divorced. We stopped going to church, stopped thinking about those things, but I kind of had like some deep spiritual desires, and so I felt like I'd heard of people, going on those types of church missions. And so I just felt like that was a good way for me to escape, and initially it was an escape, but also I just felt like that was something where I could figure out who I wanted to be or just start over. So I was just it was the best option for me. I didn't really want to join the military.
No, I understand that. Um, sorry, I'm collecting my thoughts here. These are the bits I usually edit out. I did a thing a couple of years, well, I guess a year ago, where and this is a kind of a forcing function thing, but I did a month where I would make a little drum video on Instagram every day, and I didn't plan them. I would just go in and I would like talk to the camera for 5 minutes, and I would just spit something out and then kind of stare at the wall for a minute until the next thing comes out. So those are the bits.
I'm totally fine with that too.
Cool. Those are the bits that get edited in the podcast. So I guess my question is, as somebody can relate, I kind of grew up in a religious family too, and had sort of different. I had cousins who kind of went really deep with it. I have had a cousin who went to like grade 7, grade 8. I know in Canada we flip them. In the US you would say 7th grade, 8th grade. But we had gone on a couple of trips, and my cousin actually decided he wanted to join this group, and he wound up going to a private school in New Hampshire from a pretty young age. And so I've got a lot of extended family. I've come from a big Catholic family. I have 50 first cousins.
Oh, wow.
So, with like varying degrees of where they've gone with it. But certainly the church missions are not unusual in my own experience. But I guess my question with that is still, and I would say part of my own curiosity too, because I'm somebody who, when I finished high school, I ended up going to university, going to music school, and not necessarily because I wanted to go to music school, but more like I'm the oldest of 6 kids. I grew up in the country in Prince Edward Island, Canada. And it didn't really feel like there was, like I wanted to stick around. Like I didn't want to continue living necessarily at my parents' house with my parents' rules. But I also didn't want to go to a university that a lot of my friends would be at. I specifically chose this place because, it was known as a party school, and I could play drum set instead of like concert percussion. And I only knew 2 people from high school who were going to this particular university.
So you wanted to go there to kind of have a fresh start and kind of, a lot more freedom than you had in your prior situation. You wanted to go and experience a lot of things.
Exactly. And to get away and have that fresh start. And part of it, I feel like is that, would you say, is it all internal, or is there something socially where people's preconceptions kind of create a box that you end up living inside? Like, do you think that that's something that
it's more the roles of the environment that you've been in? In every relationship you're in, you have a role. So like even with your friends and, your old high school friends, you've got roles that you're in, with your parents, you're the oldest son, or whatever. Like, so in all of those roles, you have a different, you've got a different identity or personality essentially, and you come in there and you kind of, it can be easy, for example, when you go back home, just to fall back into the roles that you've been in for a long time. Right.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think it's internal and external, obviously. The relationship between you and your friends, role is one of the big things that predicts who you are and how you show up. And so when you're kind of going through a reframe, you have to reframe the role and kind of reestablish the relationship and the boundaries and things like that, which can be difficult. It can be a lot easier, especially when you're a teenager or a young guy, young person, to just go and start fresh so that you can kind of have a fresh slate. Obviously over time, you've got to get better and better at renegotiating roles and kind of being more open and honest about what you're dealing with and the changes you want to make. But that can be a tough thing to deal with when you're younger. I think over time, especially if you're in long-term relationships, if you want to get out of rhythms or habits or just situations you feel constrained you, then you need to get better and better at reestablishing your role in these situations.
Wow, that's like a lot to chew on.
Yeah. But I think I dealt with the same thing you did. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. I needed to get my own development. I needed to just start start from scratch, so go on a mission. I had a totally new role. I was a missionary,
Yep.
I had a new purpose and a new identity in that situation, which allowed me a lot of freedom that I didn't have in my prior roles that had been established either non-intentionally or just over time, as a teenager. When I came home, same thing as you, I had goals, which you had goals, you wanted freedom, you wanted to play drums and stuff like that. So those goals led you to choosing an environment where you could get into different relationships where you weren't as constrained by your former ones.
Mm-hmm.
And so your goals shape the relationships you get into and
Sure.
the situations you put yourself into.
Yeah. And the kind of people that you meet. Now, when you went on the mission, did you go with a group of people, or was it like,
just by myself, but there's obviously a big group of people already there.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. And so where did you grow up?
Utah.
Wild.
I know. Yeah. And then did the PhD in South Carolina and now live in Florida.
How did you, it seems like in the US, there's a lot more motion. And saying that, I have a sister who lives in Calgary and 3 brothers in Montreal. So we're spread out in Canada too, but maybe it's just that there are not as many cities. It seems that people move around the US a lot more than they do here. What prompted the move to the East Coast?
PhD. I just got accepted. That was Clemson's where I did my PhD in organizational psychology. So huge move to the East Coast. My wife wanted to live on the East Coast anyways. She's a huge Disney buff. So we decided after school to come down here to Orlando, Florida. So this is where we live now.
Wow. So how's Florida?
Good. Really warm. A lot of lizards and gators if you can see them, but you never see the gators. But it's just really warm and tropical here,
That's cool, man. Because the thing too about being somebody, it's like the thing I was thinking about this earlier. It's like the thing of you live in a city and people hear the news of that city and they're like, "Whoa, were you there when this crazy thing happened?" And you're like, "Oh no, I didn't even hear about that." So Florida, I think the perception that a lot of people have is this beautiful. It's like a big vacation place. People go to Miami because it's a big party city or whatever, I guess.
Miami is for sure.
But also just that, it is a crazy place also. Do you ever run into, I don't know, just I feel like the perception is it's people streaking down the highway and
really it might be a Miami thing, or there's Orlando. It's kind of interesting because Florida's got three professional football teams, you know what I mean? It's got the Dolphins. It's got 5. It's got there's so many professional sports teams here, between Tampa, Jacksonville, Orlando, Miami, and then there's tons of little coastal towns and stuff and beaches. And so Orlando, of all those places, is probably the most family centric. Obviously it's got the Disney and Universal hubs and stuff, and it's a growing city, but we don't see that where we live. Obviously it's got, how I look at Florida from a US perspective is this is where, obviously people come here to vacation, chill on the beaches. Miami, of course, is its own little beast, as far as being next to all the islands, the Bahamas and stuff. So, Miami is different. But I see a lot of people coming here to retire because there's no state income tax. People golf here a lot. There's a lot of real estate opportunities, and I think a lot of people in the U.S. think this is people to either vacation or to retire. And obviously, there's a lot of crazy, there's a lot of crazy land stuff, the Everglades and whatnot. But
yeah, my grandparents had a place that we call them snowbirds up here. I don't know if that's a term.
Yeah. I've heard when I was living in Pittsburgh, same thing. People would have houses up and, because it's cold up there, even a little colder for you. And then they'd come down to Florida for the winter.
Yeah. I had a friend who actually spent a week down there. My friend, his wife and his 2 young kids in early March, first week of March, kind of just before things were locked down. But I think they had already already booked the trip and they went. And they basically had the resort to themselves. So they had a great time. Just flew into my mind this this thing. The other thing I was going to mention is that the former coach of the Florida Panthers hockey team used to be a teacher at my former high school. He's from a small town on PEI, Prince Edward Island, near where I grew up, and they actually had their training camp one year.
Wow. So are you back on Prince Edward Island? Did you go back?
I didn't. No, it's...
Oh, yeah, because you're in Calgary.
No, I'm not in Calgary. I'm in St. John.
Oh, okay. And where's
So
that relative to?
we're about an hour from the main border, so it's on the East Coast still. So the maritime provinces of Canada, we've got PEI, New Brunswick, and Nova Scotia. I've now lived in all three of them. St. John is not a place that I ever thought that I would live. It's kind of a place where growing up, it had a reputation as a town that stinks because there's a pulp mill here and a refinery. And I think maybe back in the early to mid 90s, that was the case. And there's also a lot of poverty. Like, it's an old shipbuilding town.
Interesting.
Yeah, like founded in the 1700s and was really like a hub of industry at one time, like in maybe the 1800s. There's a large natural harbor here. So the city kind of sprang up around the harbor. And it also is home to the Irving family, which they're like they're one of the biggest landowners in North America, like in the top
Mm.
five. But the backbone of it is oil. So the biggest oil refinery in Canada is here. And they're kind of an interesting insular company in that they're family run business. Casey Irving, who is the founder, was, I think he like started in the early 1900s working at his family's gas station, and then kind of one thing led to another. He got a gas station, so then he wanted to sell the gas that went in it, and then he I can't remember, vertical integration, I think they call the business model, where they own everything up the supply chain for themselves. So they own newspapers. They own the pulp mill that makes the papers, the the paper that the newspapers are printed on. They own the trucks. They own the oil. So they've got like gas station empire around here, which is what most people know them from. But because of that, they also like not a lot of people know how the company works internally. Anyway, we're in the kind of world headquarters of uh, Irving. We moved here a couple of years ago. 6 years ago, I was a musician living in Halifax, Nova Scotia, which is like the capital city of the East Coast of Canada ish. It's like where everybody ends up.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Somebody called it the New York of the East Coast, which it's 500,000 people. It's not New York by any stretch, but it is where people end up. I had been there for 6 years trying to make a go of my band. And my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife, had just been finishing pharmacy school, and she got a job as a mat leave. And she's like, "I'm moving to St. John." And like, I remember we had an argument where I was like, I get why this is an opportunity for you, but like my life is here. All my friends are here. My band is here. My job is here. Like there's like, I can't do it. But I ended up moving here with her.
So what
And
led you to making that decision? I mean, at some point you just had to say, this is more important than all of those things. And I can do a lot of those things in St. John, but like,
yeah,
obviously you decided that, did she want you to come?
well, it was a few, yeah, she did. It was a few things. We had been living together, which I had never done before, and had roommates, so lived with a bunch of guys my entire life. And after like 8 months of living with my girlfriend, I was, the options were be in a long distance relationship, move in with back in with a bunch of guys, um, or do something new. So it seemed like kind of an exciting thing. I had been at my job for 6 years. I was getting kind of burnt out on my role in the band, I would say. I was the drummer, which meant I was not writing songs, which meant I was compensating for that by doing kind of the business end of things, which a lot of drummers end up doing because you're just, I think it's twofold. There are people speculate there are different reasons for this, but I think it's both. It's like I'm not writing songs. I'm not, sticking my neck out, being the face of this thing. So I'm going to make sure it succeeds in other ways. I'm going to put in the work, but also I'm not getting that shot of satisfaction of like creating something and watching it come to life and stepping out in front of an audience and expressing myself. Like I don't get that satisfaction. So I think it's naturally more of a supportive role where you are willing to kind of take a backseat to somebody else's kind of creativity and vision in order to make the thing succeed yourself. But I think that you also don't get to be satiated by that. So while somebody else might say, like that was a great show, like I'm like looking at numbers. Maybe it's a personality thing too. I don't know. But I think also there's a certain amount of objectivity where it can be hard to promote yourself. And if I was writing songs and trying to promote my own songs, I can feel weird about that. But where you are a member of the band, you have enough distance between that, the creative process and the promotional aspect. So you can end up taking more of that on. Anyhow, I felt like I was the only member of my band who was really, truly worried about this stuff. There were three of us, and the other two guys were, I don't think they would mind me saying this. They didn't care. They just were all about the music, and like that's going to carry us through. And that was always our kind of challenge as a band, which like musicians loved us. We loved our own band, but a lot of people didn't get it. It was too weird. We didn't dress the part. We didn't know how to put on a show. We just showed up and like played our songs and like looked afraid on stage because,
you never made that full transition to becoming professionals. Like, cause that's an identity shift. You know what I mean? Like, I know a lot of authors never make that. Like, I know a lot of people who blogged on Medium as an example, where I blogged for so long, and none of them ever made that transition to becoming a professional. Like, they were like, I'm an artist, but you have to also see yourself as a professional. And that is a huge shift where you have to like get good at business and marketing and like playing the part. It could be being on stage in a different way,
yes,
that's a huge shift that a lot of people don't make.
So this is what I actually really wanted to dig into with you, because I think this is when I know you'd put the call out for podcasts, and I was like, I don't know if it's really a fit because my show is traditionally a musician show, but I think that is such a vital part of it that it's like a missing piece of the puzzle for a lot of people. And a lot of people don't realize it. Like, we were a band where the three of us had gone to music school together, and it is a different thing. Like, I've been reading this book about Neil Young. And so Neil Young, different time, grew up in Winnipeg in the 60s. He was bouncing back and forth between Winnipeg and Toronto. His parents split up, drops out of high school 6 months ago, moves to starts gigging around Winnipeg, moves to Fort Williams, which is now Thunder Bay, with his band, place where he knows nobody after he's gigging around town, and just like plays, lives off crackers and Spam in a motel, moves to Toronto, lasts 8 months there, is frustrated he's not having success. And people are saying like he could have got gigs if he would have done cover songs, didn't want to do it. Eventually he hit a point where he's like, even if I'm big in Toronto, all I am is big in Toronto. But if I move to LA, he heard Mamas and the Papas, California Dreamin' on the radio. It's like, if I move to LA, I'm big in the world if I can make it big there. So
makes sense.
Totally. 20 years old, hops in a car, no plan, just drives down, hoping to meet up with Stephen Stills, who he'd met along the way. And the rest is history, as they say. But that is...
The rest is definitely not history. He did a lot, you know what I mean, aside from just going to LA. But
no kidding.
To me, it was obvious that he was committed to going big, and there's a really good book called It's Not How Good You Are, It's How Good You Want to Be.
I've read that one.
Yeah, and it's all about how like anyone who becomes successful doesn't do so because of their talent, because they became successful because they wanted to become successful.
Yes.
And I think that's something that you have to admit to yourself and everyone else. If you're a pure artist, you may not be willing to admit that. It may just be about the music. But to me, your story about Neil Young was like, it's obvious he loved the music, but it's obvious he also wanted to be very successful. That's why he went to LA. And whatever he did in LA was very committed to the goal of becoming successful and shifting, a lot of the shifts that he probably had to make in order to actually get his music out there and to be that person who we now know as Neil Young. There was probably a lot of changes he went through and a lot of ups and downs to become that person.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, and it's a thing that I feel like it doesn't exist as much in the same way anymore, or maybe that's just my own experience, but it is something that I find really interesting, where now, especially in Canada, we've got incentive programs where if you are a musician, there are grants available, you can kind of get your project done. But what ends up happening is the grants are not a big enough. I myself took a bit of a leap of faith and went to just a music industry conference in LA a year or two ago. And it was after my band had broken up. It was the first time I had done something like this on my own. But it was this guy whose newsletter I read, Bob Lefsetz. I don't know if you know that
Never
dude.
heard of him.
He's I just, following kind of music industry writing on the internet. He's a guy whose blog I started following, and he's known for really like not holding back, but also like really predicting trends in the industry that people are afraid to embrace. So he was like talking about how like CDs are done, the internet is taking over, and like being in the thick of the music industry before anybody else was. And he like, he's not always right. He I don't know if you've ever heard the Taylor Swift song Mean.
I don't know. Probably.
It's
Most Taylor
supposedly
Swift
about this
songs are pretty
guy.
popular, right?
Yeah. It's supposedly about this guy.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's
Anyhow,
funny.
yeah,
That's an honor, I guess. That's an honor, even though maybe not one you want, but it's a good to have Taylor Swift singing about you. That's pretty
yeah,
good.
exactly. It means you've got some, you've made an impact. But anyhow, he did a podcast. I was listening to his podcast, and then he sent out an e-blast saying, I'm putting on this conference. And I had people respond to his emails, and he reprints them. And he was talking about hanging out with Al Cooper, who's a session musician, like played on Bob Dylan records, played with, whoever keyboard player. And I was like, oh man, I was like listening to this podcast. I loved it. I want to hang out with you guys, listening to you tell stories. And then the next day he sends out this thing. It's like, I'm putting on this conference in Santa Barbara. If you've ever wanted to come hang out, now's your chance. I was like, now's my chance. So anyway, I did it. I actually quit my job to go. It was like the winds of change were blowing at that time anyway. I was just working in a coffee shop. I was like, I had moved back, like kind of bounced back and forth between St. John and Halifax doing the band thing. The 3 years that we were apart were our 3 most successful years. So yeah, strangely enough, we had worked with people outside of our circle for the first time, hired a mix engineer from New York who has worked with the Strokes and Vampire Weekend and people like indie bands of note. But prior to that had only worked with people we had known ever. But the guy whose studio we recorded at, he's like, I think you guys have got something here, and it would be worth it to hire somebody legit, like somebody professional. Which prior to that, we had always been limited by this idea of like, well, we can't afford that, we can't do this.
Yeah, that's a very amateurish perspective.
Isn't it funny?
It's really when you start investing at the level of a professional that you become a professional.
Well, that's
an act of courage, you know what I mean? But you start to say, we're going to start doing this and spending more money on this because we're serious about this. I mean, that's a big step, is when you start investing money at a level of a professional, even if you're not one yet. That's what gets you there in a lot of ways.
Right. So this is the thing. When I went to this like, we are a band who, we put out an EP and didn't master it because we didn't have the couple $100 to do it. Didn't want to pay to have professional pictures taken at a cost of $200.
Yeah.
But we're like,
it's so small-minded, right?
And what ends up happening is no one takes you seriously because you took your own pictures and you didn't know what you were doing.
Yeah.
It's funny because
keep going. No, this is great. I'm loving this. I'm loving this story.
Oh, cool. Yeah, and so you end up creating this reality. Like, we put out our album that we spent a year recording, and the album was great. And like, we made the jackets ourselves, and like, we made records, and we went on tour with this thing, and we hired a publicist, but of course we didn't hire a photographer. And so we're getting reviews in these like daily, weekly, weekly arts newspapers or whatever on our album release tour. And here's this one in Kitchener-Waterloo, Ontario, saying, to look at these guys, you'd think they'd just be playing Dungeons and Dragons in their basement all day, but actually they're a great band. And like, this is, our big shot. It's our record. It's we don't have another one of these for a couple of years, and you end up sabotaging yourself that way with that kind of small-mindedness. But anyhow, so fast forward a bunch of years, my band is broken up and I go to this conference and they're talking about how to promote a single properly and really make it successful, you need to spend $500,000 and a year on one song. And it was just such a like eye-opening moment where, this like couple grand that we have been thinking like.
Here's what's crazy though. Here's what's crazy, and this is something I've figured out. And it is a big identity shifter. But like, if you were super committed to getting that band or your own music out there, this may sound crazy, you'd find a way to figure out 500 grand. I'm just telling you, as weird as that sounds, the only reason why I've learned how to make millions of dollars, and I have, is because I want to get my books out there. That's the weird thing is that it's possible, and that's part of the identity shift is like, if I'm committed to this goal, I'll figure out how to do anything to get it there, even if that's learning how to make a lot of money. And there are ways to do that. Only I believe that, like, I have this philosophy. I learned it from, I guess, many different sources, but have you heard of Dan Sullivan up there in Strategic Coach? He's up there in Canada.
Mainly through your stuff.
Yeah. He's an interesting guy. But one of the things he says is the bigger the future, the better the present. And I'll explain that because, like, the bigger the goal, the more extreme the process. That makes sense, right? Absolutely. Like, if it's a huge goal, like, it's a different process than if it's a small goal. And the goal shapes the process. And so if there's this huge goal, it's going to require a lot more either sacrifice or courage or failing or figuring out, And that's why I think the bigger the goal, the better the present. That doesn't mean the present's actually happy. The present is crazy. The present is bold. The present is filled with a lot of failure and a lot of trying different things rather, you put yourself out there a lot more, in various ways. And you figure out your resourcefulness and figuring out how to get help in different ways when you're really like, I'm going to do this thing and I don't really know what it's going to require of me to figure out how to do or become. But, if I have to learn how to make or raise $500,000 because I want this done in the right way, I have no clue what that looks like, but I'm going to do it. And getting there is going to have to change me a lot. It's an interesting process when you decide you're going to commit to the goal, because then you have to own that you have to change in many ways and deal with things that you don't really want to deal with to get there. Even if that is okay, if to get there, I have to, if the process is that I have to make $500,000 in some way or raise it, crap, how do you do that now? Then it changes your questions. Like, I remember when I decided I wanted to become a professional writer, I learned that I had to get 100,000 email subscribers. And to me, I was like, what the crap? How do you do that? And I remember consigning to the fact that I had to start blogging. That was not something I wanted to do, and learning marketing. Like, I didn't want to do those things, but I was like, if I want to be a real author, I guess I've got to do this. And I remember telling one of my friends in my PhD program, I've got to do this, dude. Like, I've got to go out and start blogging and doing this. Like, and he could see the consigned look on my face. But then you get into the process. You do start to get excited about it over time.
And can you talk for a second about the importance of that? Like, why 100,000 subscribers? Why that number?
That was the number that I was told. So my goal, whatever your goal was, it required $500,000 of marketing. My goal was that I wanted to get a 6-figure book deal with one of the major publishers in New York. And I'm very, big on, like, first you start with your identity, you start with your future self. And there's a lot of research that explains why your future self should really shape everything you're doing today. But I wanted to be a professional author. This is during my first year of my PhD program back in 2014 or 15. And I was just like, I want to be writing big books. I want to be providing well for my family. I want the freedom to, like, work from wherever I want. I don't want a typical job. And so those were the attributes of my future self that I was developing and then I had to actually ask a lot of people questions, agents, writers, publishers, like, how do you actually get a 6-figure book deal? And they said, well, you have to have at least 100,000 email subscribers to even be considered for such a book deal. I mean, you could get a book deal for like $10,000 if you have, a couple thousand readers. But if you want to start getting paid 6 figures to write books, you need at least 100,000 email subscribers. That was kind of the base requirement. And that was something I kept hearing over and over at this time. And I was like, then I had to ask a bunch of people, how do you get 100,000 email subscribers? I had to ask those questions and I had to reverse engineer that process. And that's the thing that shaped my trajectory is that goal. I think whatever person's trajectory is, it's based on their goals. And so my trajectory on Medium and other platforms was just to serve that one goal.
Right. Um, so do you think that it is vital that, I mean, I suppose this is a kind of a two-part question, but I would say like having the specific goal and also defining your own version of success.
I think your own version of success is your future self. That's your future identity.
Mhm.
It's who you want to be. You know, they say that the number one deathbed regret that people have is that they didn't have the courage to be who they wanted to be. Instead, they lived up to the expectations of those around them. They kind of stuck with the persona they had already developed, or they just stayed within the comfort zone. Your comfort zone and your personality are essentially the same thing. And so, um, yeah, I think that defined success is who you want to be. You know, like I could go out and become a billionaire selling cars, but if it doesn't match up with the person I ultimately want to be, then I won't ever feel successful. You know, so success is who you want to be. And you need to define that for yourself. And they call that your future self, the person you are striving to be. What's interesting from a psychological perspective, like have you ever heard of the book Man's Search for Meaning from Viktor Frankl?
Yes, I read it earlier, or I audio booked it earlier this month.
It's a famous, really important book. And one of the things he explains very potently in that book is that when people in this book's all about the German concentration camps of like World War II, et cetera. But one of the things he talked about is that the moment a person loses a sense of purpose for their life, they died very fast in the concentration camps. You know, like you need a purpose, you need a goal. And so like he found that like a lot of people who thought that they would get out by Christmas, you know, a lot of people were like looking forward to Christmas. And it's, you know, they thought that they would get out of the concentration camps. When Christmas passed, a lot of people would immediately start dying because now their goal was gone. And so from a psychological perspective, it sounds weird, but you need goals. Like it's impossible to be happy in the present without something to look forward to. As human beings, we're actually best off striving for a future, which is kind of goes against the idea that you have to be living only for the today, only for the present. Like there's a lot of advice like the present is all that exists. But from a psychological perspective, you know, and he breaks it down in Man's Search for Meaning. The moment you cease to have a goal that you're striving for, like your life goes in shambles. You lose your identity, you lose your purpose, you just fall apart as a person. And if the situation is tough enough, like a concentration camp, you'll die. Your body will literally shut down. Like your nervous system will stop working. And so I think that having a clear future self that you've defined and that you're actively striving for is like the only way to be happy in the present. Did I cut out?
Yes.
Bummer.
It was so good, dude.
Where was I?
It was like the only way to be happy in the prep.
Okay, that's cool. I'll say it. Yeah, you want me to finish it?
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, really the only way to be. So did I go through all the Frankl stuff?
Oh, no, we can just leave. I think it was a beautiful moment. You're not going to recreate it. That's cool, man.
I could recreate it if you want me to, bro. I mean, I'll just finish the thought. Really, the only way to be happy in the present from a psychological perspective is to be actively pursuing a future. Like if you're not, you know, this is why I think it's bad advice to just say live in the moment, because it's impossible to live happily in the moment unless you're actively striving for a future. Like your life will fall apart. Frankl really breaks that down. Like if you don't have a goal that you're actively seeking that's above yourself, literally you lose meaning and purpose in your life.
That's interesting. So
that's why you would want to start with defining success as who you ultimately want to be.
Yeah.
And the more you're striving for that on a daily basis, the more meaning and purpose you'll have in your life.
Right.
Which is kind of not the easiest, funnest way to live, but it's the only way to have meaning and purpose. And that's really what leads to happiness. That's what Frankl talks about, is you can't pursue happiness directly. It has to like be an unintended consequence of pursuing something above your current self.
Yeah. So would you say that growth is like basically humans, like we got to grow till we die?
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%. You've got to be seeking a meaning and a purpose. Yeah. I mean, the moment you stop that, that's when you die. That's why death rates skyrocket when people retire from their jobs. Usually, you know, you live for another 6 or less years after you've retired from your job. This is why people recommend you just don't retire. You keep you know, whether it's you transition to something else, you have to be pursuing some meaningful purpose that's future based. You know, even if that's just to develop relationships with your grandkids or create experiences, like you have to have a meaning and a purpose or else your present really loses, and your identity evaporate and your body literally starts to shut down.
Crazy. I would say though, like experientially, that even in the last week, like I had a moment yesterday where my coming week was just, my schedule is kind of all out of whack right now. So currently I work at a school. It's a performing arts school. We're a nonprofit. We're in this like crazy old 1880s church. So it's got a turret. There are like rooms that people do music in. There's a dance studio. There's a recital hall, and then the main kind of church area. The pews have been taken out, and it's decommissioned now, and it's used as a theater space. But obviously, we can't operate right now. We can't do most of what we do is group classes. There's people using the same equipment, like sharing microphones and that kind of thing can't happen right now. So the future was pretty uncertain. Last week, we moved all of our classes online. I've been teaching online for a couple of weeks now and kind of settling into the groove. But my job, other than teaching, has been like the administrative guy. So I'm there behind the front desk while we're open, and I'm helping people with what they need. And so now a lot of it is kind of a vacuum. There is setup, but there's no schedule. I had to yesterday sit down and make a schedule for myself for the rest of the week because I just was freaking out. And it's a funny thing where you think that you crave that kind of freedom, like, whoa, no work, no rules. It's
You
bad.
don't. No, I mean, people, they lose their minds like when they like retire and they go live on the beach or golf all day. Like, unless you're actively pursuing something really serious, most people lose their minds pretty quick in those situations.
Yeah, that's wild. Okay, so we are getting low on time. We have not talked about your book yet. I feel like a lot of this is ground that you cover in your book, Personality Isn't Permanent, which this episode is going to come out around the time of publication. So for those who are listening, it is April 21st today, and June 16th, the book comes out.
Yep.
Yeah. What's for my listeners, what's the book about?
Yeah, the book is about, I explain a lot of things. There's a lot of myths in pop culture about who we are as people, what personality is. A lot of people think personality is innate. It's non-changeable. It's something you have to discover. Once you discover your true self, you can then go live your goals. It's a really limiting way of life, and it's really not what the research shows. And so my book explains why personality always changes, and about how you can be the one who actively shapes who you become. Obviously, there's a lot of things you have to do in order for that to occur. You've probably got to resolve a lot of former traumas in your life, baggage that you've been holding on to from your past. You got to reframe that and change how you view your own past and how you explain it. Ultimately, you've got to get clear on your future self. You've got to change your environment, change your identity. I mean, there's so many aspects of this, but it's really how you grow and change as a person anyways. And so this book just explains the process so that you can be the one actively doing it rather than just living on autopilot or living reactive and being like striving to. The goal is, the goal of the book is to help you be consistent in your daily life towards your future self, the person you want to be, rather than being consistent in your daily life towards the person you were yesterday. And I would argue that most people are living their life consistent with who they've been yesterday. And so that's really what the book's about. And I break down a lot of things. I explain why tests like Myers-Briggs and Enneagram are not scientific. They're terrible for identity. It's it's going to be a controversial book in a lot of ways, but really science-based. And it will help you, throughout the book, there's about 150 journal prompts to help you reframe former experiences, change your memories, and also to clarify your future self and actively become very comfortable with uncertainty and very comfortable and flexible outside your comfort zone. And so there's a lot in there, but I think your listeners would like it if they want to become excellent musicians.
Well, I think so. There are a couple of things that this bring to mind for me, and I found it funny in the intro. You talk about how because of a personality test,
I almost didn't get married.
Yeah. I didn't have an experience that extreme, but I didn't get hired for a job because of a personality test. I couldn't believe it. I showed up for this interview. It was an hour.
That's pretty funny, dude. And I'm sorry that happened to you.
Oh, whatever.
Because you probably would have been totally fine for the job.
I thought so. It was like 45 minutes of an interview. And I couldn't believe it. 45 minutes they're talking to me, and we're hanging out, getting to know each other, and then the last 15 they make me fill out this test on the computer, and it spits out 30 pages worth of information, and I say, cool, thanks, hope to hear from you soon at the end of the interview. And they're like, well, yeah, we got a lot of information to sort through here. So I was like, what do you mean? You just talked to me for an hour? But anyhow, I didn't get the job based on the results of the test because I was not at that time. Anyhow, it told me I'm more of like a supportive person. I'm not like a salesperson.
You could have become a salesperson through that role. You could have become really good at it if you were committed to that goal. And if you had a reason to do it, you could have become brilliant at it. But it seems like they wanted someone who already thought they were brilliant at it.
Right.
And your current persona and how you answered the test was, this isn't who I am yet.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, that's fine. I'm in the end, I think I would have agreed with that assessment at the time. Like, I don't think I would have wanted to be in that role. I still don't know that I would.
But you applied for that role, right?
Sort of. It was like on a recommendation from somebody else. I can't remember. It was set up.
So you may not have actually been a good fit for the job.
No, maybe not. But I would say the other thing that is curious to me is, so I'm a musician, and I teach lessons. And so just the idea of kind of natural talent versus work ethic is a common one I find, especially in people who are coming in. And I think you get a different.
But here's the question: is it really about talent at the end of the day? I mean, talent's really important, but it really depends on the goal. If the goal is just to be the best musician, then talent probably really matters. But if the goal is to be a professional musician, it really depends on the goal. And if the goal is to be a successful musician, talent is probably sub-level. It's incredibly important, but it's less important than the person's commitment to whatever goal they have.
Well, I just find it even to step back from.
Often the best musicians are not the ones who are the most successful, right?
No, they're not. It's a thing that I found playing with different people, being somebody who had gone from like high school to music school because I had this class in high school where I didn't have to sit at a desk. I could like hang out at the back of the room and play drums, and to playing in the music scene or whatever, to teaching. But it's a thing that I often hear from people is like, oh yeah, you just have this natural ability, or like these people like John Bonham was a natural, and maybe to some degree, but I would say for myself, my only natural ability is my obsession and my willingness to just stick with it for hours.
That is the truth. Anyone even there's a big documentary going on with Michael Jordan right now. Truth is he wasn't that great of a basketball player. Like when he went into college, they really questioned Michael Jordan. He didn't have a lot of skills. Like he was really athletic, but he developed such beautiful skills. But yeah, I think that when you really look, so there's a really good book on all of this. It's by Carol Dweck. It's called Mindset. Yeah. Anyone who emphasizes natural talent has what she calls a fixed mindset. Anyone who emphasizes effort, growth, learning has a growth mindset. And usually those are the people who become the best in the world at what they do. No one who's brilliant at what they do has a fixed mindset.
No, I don't think you can, because speaking of somebody who did have one, I read that book and it shed some light a few years ago, but she talks about, kids who do well in school. Like it was kind of a huge deal for me as somebody who like didn't have to really try in school to get pretty good grades. I played in the school band, which is like, I feel like that's like embarrassing, but it wasn't for me at my school and in my time. And we were good. We went to the National Music Festival in Toronto. We won the gold standard, and it just seemed like, you don't have to dedicate your entire life to it. You just kind of do it sometimes and things just work out. But then when you're put into a challenging situation like myself, who ends up, right? I didn't choose it myself. I just somehow was plunked down in this university jazz program where all of a sudden you need to try. I'm not good at music theory. I'd never failed a class before in my life. I failed first year music theory twice. I was in third year, like with the first year kids trying to figure this stuff out because I play the drums. I don't use jazz scales on my instrument. And so I was always of the, like, both, I don't need to learn it because I don't care. And I don't need to work at it because I don't work at it. You know, like that's just, either I'm smart and I can do this, or I'm not smart and I can't.
Totally. I think that that's a typical mindset that we all grow up with. You know what I mean? And that's actually how most people view personality, is that you are one way and that's who you are. You know, if you are an introvert, that's where you are. That's what's easy for you. That's what you stick to. Mm-hmm. So it's very much the same idea. You know, people view themselves in very fixed terms, rather than committing to the person they really want to be and going through the change process to become that version of themselves. It's a lot easier just to stick with your comfort zone and explain yourself that way.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. We only have a couple of minutes left. So one question I wanted to ask you about is your release strategy, this being a musician show. It's something in the age of like streaming music, albums, singles, whatever. What do we do? Drop the album, then promote it. You're doing 200 podcasts for this book release?
I'm actually doing 600.
You're doing 600 podcasts? How many are you doing today?
Well, I'm not doing 600 before the book comes out. So I started about 8 to 10 weeks ago, actually starting on this journey. Obviously, I've been writing the book for a year and a half, prepping a lot of things. If you go to my website, you'll see that things have actually changed quite a bit. So basically, release strategy is this. Podcasts really are a great way to develop relationships with cool people like you. And just to know people who have audiences and to talk about conversations around the book in different fashions that are relevant to you. You know what I mean? And so I think that podcasts really are useful. They're kind of the ground roots way. Like if you were a band, it would be like going and playing hundreds of shows.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, but by the time the book comes out in June 16th, I'll have done about 275 that all go out similar around the book. But I'm going to do about 600 this year, because with Willpower Doesn't Work, I kind of gave up on it after the book came out. I also had to finish school, so I just kind of let go after the big book push. I just went and finished school and then started the next book. With this one, I really want to sell millions of copies to aid my future self that I want to become. And also just because I think that this book's a lot better than the last one. So I'm going to do about 600 podcasts this year. Really getting back into blogging, which I haven't done since about 2018 because I've written 2 books and finished a PhD since then. So I'm getting back into blogging, but one of the big things I'm doing right now, and if you go to my website, you'll see it. So it's benjaminhardy.com. I'm giving away 3 free online courses. And I'm going to start pumping out a bunch of ads on Facebook and YouTube because we got about 8 weeks until the book comes out. So goal is to sell about 10,000 individual copies pre-orders before the book comes out. Then about 275 podcasts are going to explode. And then I'm just going to go for the long term. You know, a lot of the big opportunities come within about 6 months after the book comes out. So the goal is to sell actually 1 million copies this year. Wow. It's going to be crazy.
So you got this all mapped out. How long pre-release did you start working on this idea?
The strategy?
Yep.
Oh, dude, I've been studying it forever. I mean, when Willpower Doesn't Work came out, it didn't work. The strategy failed. It bombed, you know, probably for similar reasons to what we've described in the past as self-sabotage. I wasn't ready yet to see myself as I was already a professional author, and it was good enough to sell 100,000 copies, which is really good. But I didn't yet see myself as that author who's going to sell millions of books and really establish myself. I was a really famous blogger, you know, and that's cool, but I wasn't ready yet to make that leap. And in my mind, I needed to get the PhD before I could make that leap. And I needed to write a book that I felt like was worthy of that leap. And I didn't feel like Willpower was there. And Willpower potentially could have been there, but my identity was too small. And so that's with this book, I was very clear on the future self. I wrote the book with my vision in mind. And now I'm going through the process of marketing with that vision in mind. So it's a lot bigger, a lot longer term perspective. And I'm willing to do a lot more than I did on the last book. I think I did like 50 podcasts is all for Willpower Doesn't Work. And I'm doing way more with this book because I'm way more committed to it now.
But the vision dictates everything else.
It has to. Otherwise, you know, you're just going through some random process that may lead to nowhere. You know, and that's not meaningful, and that's not something that I would want to do. You know, I studied how do you sell millions of books, you know, and studied it from people who have done that. And so my strategy is based on that type of advice because that's closer to my goal. Obviously, my own personal definition of success is never going to be like someone else's, but you can still use people's strategies to help you get there when you're clear on where you want to go.
I think those are beautiful words to sign off on.
Dude, I think you're beautiful, man. It was really good to chat with you, bro.
Right back at you. Yeah. Yeah.
So I would love to hear, just as a final thought, like, what would you love to do, bro? Like, what would just be the best? You're already doing it in many ways, but what would be some stretch that would just like really terrify you, that if you started doing it, you'd have to really reestablish yourself in a lot of your relationships and your persona? What would just excite and freak you out, whether it be around the podcast, your music? What is it that would terrify you to truly approach and try?
Oh, it's music, but it's the next thing for me. So I play the drums, excited. But I've always wanted to be I've never identified as a drummer in the way that, like,
sure,
drum pop, the world of drum culture, it's like a drummer's one thing. That's not me. So I sing, I play guitar, I write music. I've never really gone for it on my own. I've like gotten.
You got to do it, dude. Years. You got to tell everyone you're going to do it, by the way, as well. I mean, one of the things I talk about in the book is to tell everyone about who your future self is. Tell everyone that you're going to do this and that you're not there yet, but you're going to do it. You know what I mean? Is
that so that you can't escape?
That's a big part of it. It's also so that you can actually believe it yourself. Yeah, it cultivates an environment where you can't escape, and then you feel compelled to act towards your future self. But also, you start to believe it when you start telling people. I mean, if you're keeping it secret, then maybe you don't really believe it. So maybe once your identity gets really clear, when you start telling everyone about who you want to be, and then you start showing up that way, and people are like, "Oh yeah, he told me that was going to happen." That's where you get serious, is when you start clarifying who you want to be and then telling everyone about it. Because then you start to feel compelled. Why would you want to leave yourself and escape? Aren't you serious about it?
Sorry?
I said, why would you want to leave yourself and escape?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know.
There's no reason to escape from your future self. That's the only person you want to be.
Right. Yeah.
There should be no escape to be someone else.
No, it's funny. I don't know. But obviously,
I love it, dude. I'm excited for you to start playing. It's beautiful.
Yeah. Well, it's a funny time, right? Because it was like getting to the point where it's like, that's got to happen. I did a thing, and it was based on reading, like, what was the Bo Eason book? So
nice.
Where he's like talking about like you want to build a habit, and it's a 66-day cycle. I can't remember the number, but I like woke up at 4:30 in the morning one day, couldn't sleep, hadn't written anything in a while. And I came down to my basement and was just like messing around on the guitar. And I was like, I came up with a little song. I recorded on my little recorder, and I was like, there's always this like leap between, it's like, well, I can't put this out because I've been in a band and I know you got to like promote things in a certain way. But also the flip side of it is I can record something on my phone and put it on the internet today.
Do it, dude.
Well, I did. And then I was like, I'm going to do this every day for 68 days because that's what I think this thing is. So I did a song a day for 68 days. And the first couple of days, you're like, oh, you feel weird about it. But by the end of it, you're like, yeah, this is, and there's like.
And by the end of it, people kind of expect it from you.
Yes. And nobody.
And they're like, this is who you are now. I guess this is just who Ryan is. He does this now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So now it's like, I don't know, do I figure out live streams or what? I got lots of time to work on my live show, but that's not exactly what I want, but we'll see.
Yeah, man. Well, dude, I'm excited for you, man. Thanks for letting me be on your show. It's been an absolute pleasure. You're a gem, and I'm excited about your future self, dude. I'm excited for you to deal with the anxieties of dealing with your future self.
Hey, right back at you. Thank you so much for being here.
It's been a huge pleasure, man. See you, Ryan.
All right, that was a fun one, right? Interesting getting his perspective on, especially as somebody like completely outside of the music industry, on the struggles of my little indie band, which I feel like are the struggles of so many indie bands, especially out here because we all come up in the same environment. So big thanks to Ben Hardy and his people, and to you for listening all the way through. Good for you. You made it. LearnDrums.ca, once again, is the home online for all of this. If you like what you hear, you can like, share, subscribe. LearnDrums.ca/hitmakers will take you to the podcast archive. You can access it on your favorite device. There's a button for a bunch of the different ones. Learn Drums on Instagram or learndrums.ca on Facebook and YouTube. And that's DOTCA. Learn Drums, DOTCA, on either Facebook or YouTube. I've been doing a show on Saturday nights calling it Hitmakers After Dark, which is a live stream thing where I've been talking to some musician friends. It's been pretty fun. That will make a reappearance sometime in the weeks and months to come. Maybe this week. Who knows? You'll have to stay tuned to find out. All right. Thanks so much for being here. If you like what you hear, you can rate us, leave a review. All that stuff helps. And we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.